Hello and welcome to the Craft Beer Corner. For today's beer review, we've got a fun one, definitely going to be fun for me. We're jumping into another beer from a German brewer. Specifically, today's is from, hold on, it's a mouthful. It's König Ludwig Schloßbrauerie Katlenberg. And that is colloquially just known as König Ludwig or King Ludwig. And this is one of the very first Hefeweizens I ever had back in the day at Mr. Dunderbox, like 20 some odd years ago. This is, of course, a Weißbier. They call it Weißbier. It's a wheat beer, Hefeweizen, Weißbier, whatever you want to call it. This one clocks in at 5.5% ABV, and König Ludwig is based in Fürstenbruck in Bavaria, state of Germany. So this is kind of an interesting beer because the Hefeweizen beer style in Bavaria, the royal family, hence the name König Ludwig, had the rights for over 200 years as the sole brewer of the style in Bavaria state in Germany. So this one has a long historical line to it. Label art on this is very classic German brewer, very clean design, understated. It's got the seal on there, but that is, nice clean label. So König Ludwig is the colloquial, what most people would just call it, and Schloßbrauerie Katlenberg is the more specific full name of the brewer. Katlenberg is, I don't know if that's kind of a region or if that's kind of a name of who started it, but Schloßbrauerei is a compound word. Schloss is the German word for castle, Brauerei is a brewery. So King Ludwig's Castle or, estate brewery Katlenberg. Full name. But nonetheless, we're going to get this cracked today. We've got our nice wheat beer glass. So we're going to be pouring this right in. Oh yeah. And this is a beer I have had many, many times over the years, though it's been quite a while. I would guess 15, 20 years, give or take at least, since I've had one of these. So I'm very much looking forward to jumping back into it. It was one of the very first Hefeweizens that I ever tried. So visually, classic kind of pale yellow Hefeweizen, very active in terms of carbonation. It's got a mix of kind of smaller champagne-like effervescence coming up, as well as some larger kind of medium size from the nice head here. This glass is designed specifically for that, for Hefeweizens. So let's get right in for a sniff. Oh yeah. No surprises there. It smells of classic Hefeweizen. It's got a little bit of kind of a yeasty back to it, kind of doughy, but then you get this classic clove and banana aroma. It's a perfect aroma. It's right in the wheelhouse of the color. Formed a nice head. It's very active in terms of carbonation. Don't know how long that'll actually stick around. I'm going to go ahead and top that off just a little bit. And we're going to jump right in for our first sip. My first one in 15 or 20 years. Take one. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. That is classic. Oh, I remember this one. Oh, I remember it well. So let's start with body and mouthfeel. It's 5.5% on a Hefeweizen. This is very much a classic Hefeweizen weight and texture. It is medium light. That is perfect for the style. The mouthfeel has the right amount of resistance. It's not too thin. It's not too thick. It feels exactly right for the style. So no surprises here. This one does get a little bit foamy when you agitate around the palate, but it's not super thick, so it doesn't really feel viscous and sticky, like it's not sticking all over the palate. But it does feel very, very nice and perfectly appropriate for the beer style. In terms of the flavor profile, this is classic German Hefeweizen. It's got this kind of light malt back to it that is very much kind of this grainy, cereal-like kind of underpinning. And then, of course, it's got the classic Hefeweizen yeast that, just like in the aroma, does impart large flavor compounds, specifically notes of clove. Now, you get a little bit of the banana on the nose. You get a little bit of that in the flavor here. But this specific Hefeweizen is 100% both aroma and flavor dominated by the clove, which is kind of the classic, typical, if you're getting anything out of a Hefeweizen yeast strain, it's going to be the clove. Some of these other fruity accents that can pop in are just kind of off-the-cuff ones that happen in specific beers with specific strains, but this is very much a classic German Hefeweizen. It's really pulling no punches. There's no surprises at all. It is just a perfectly executed classic beer style, and I absolutely love it. So I'm going to jump back in, of course, for a second sip. I'm going to let it re-intensify. We'll pick it apart again. Let me finish topping this off. We'll pick it apart again, make sure I'm not missing any nuance. Then we'll talk about the balance and the finish. But on sip one, this takes me back an absolutely delicious Hefeweizen. Take two. Clove in combination with grain. That's the dual. Little bits of banana kind of pop in, little bit. It's maybe 5% kind of in the overall kind of Hefeweizen yeast strain flavor profile that it imparts. It is dominated by clove, and it's not an aggressive clove. Some are a lot more in your face, bold, pungent. This one I would say is kind of on the medium high, but it's not highly aggressive. Some can be, this one's not. This is very nice. It's got this very clean feel to it. In terms of any other nuance in there, you could make an argument there's some subtle kind of floating apricot and other stone fruit flavors that pop in. I mean, it's very subtle. You've really got to be paying attention, but this one 100% is dominated by that classic clove bite. In terms of the balance on this, a beer style like this, we're talking the balance of the grains. Of course, as a Weißbier or Hefeweizen, if you prefer, it really would be more appropriate to call it a Weißbier. It is Bavarian state brewed. That's their terminology in the South. But the best way I could say, you know, when we're talking balance is really a strike between the volume of barley and wheat, as well as, you know, the yeast and the hops. So obviously, it's not a classically pungent, bitter beer style. Indeed, it's quite subtle on this. König Ludwig claims 15 IBUs. I'd say, yeah, maybe to my palate, it's closer to 5-10. It does not feel like a bitter beer. This is a beer style all about that classic Hefeweizen yeast characteristic that comes through perfectly. So for my money, it's balanced perfectly. I mean, this is a very, very old German brewer. They've been brewing it for a long time, and it shows. I mean, this is just one of the reasons I love having a German beer from these classic old German brewers. They've been doing them for centuries, and they know exactly what they're doing. They make perfect examples of their given styles. So the finish on this one. This one's a little bit longer than average in terms of finish, and it does come down to that slightly bigger intensity of clove. Like I said, it's not over the top, but it's not middle of the road either. It's kind of somewhere between them. So you do get that nice clovey bite, even though it doesn't have a jarring intensity. It does actually linger on the palate quite a bit longer than average for the beer style. And it's kind of finishes exactly where it started. It finishes exactly with that kind of clove accent from the yeast strain, as well as that underpinning of this very grain and cereal-like element from the underpinned malt bill here. Guys, this is just a classic, perfectly brewed Weißbier. I absolutely love it. It's been years. I figured it was time to do this beer justice and get it properly ranked. So I'm going to take my time and sip on this one. And when we come back, we will do exactly that. All right, now that we've gotten to enjoy this beer, we're going to get it ranked. This was König Ludwig Schloßbrauerie Katlenberg Weißbier. Weißbier or Hefeweizen if you prefer. König Ludwig, as they are called colloquially, is located in Fürstenfeldbruck, Germany in Bavaria state. This one clocked in at 5.5% ABV. So guys, this was just another classic, extremely well done example of a specific beer style from a German brewer. And look, it stands to reason. I've said it time and again, and I'll repeat it over and over. If you want to have an old Germanic of origin beer style that's brewed extremely well, just go one of these big old German brewers. They've been brewing them literally for centuries, and they have it down to a science. And this was another perfect example of that. This is a beer I've had many times over the years, but I probably haven't had one in 15 or 20, and it was a real treat to jump back into this. Indeed, across the board, this beer did exceptionally well. Just two single categories that did not get a perfect score, so we'll jump straight to those two in question. The first of those was the finish. So the finish on this beer was longer than average, which is maybe a little bit surprising given that the overall kind of clove pungency intensity on this beer for a Weißbier was maybe not quite as intense as some, but on the back end, it did linger around longer than some that even are more intense on the front side. So overall, I guess it kind of balanced out, but the finish on this one was above average and it gets a 7 out of 10. And then the second category that did not get a perfect score was the head and retention. In general, this one did a very, very good job, definitely well above average, but it did settle down just a little bit quicker than I would have liked. And I can tell you from experience, that's the difference in having it from not quite 12-ounce bottle poured into a glass at home versus having it pulled on a draft system. This is one of those beers I was fortunate, Mr. Dunderbox in Tampa, to have on draft many, many times. They have a lot of great classic popular German beers on draft. This is one, and I can tell you on a properly set up draft system, yeah, you're gonna get a great head that's gonna stick around. But honestly, for poured at home, it did a great job. And the head and retention does get an 8 out of 10. That does, of course, leave a perfect 10 out of 10 in the remaining 8 categories. That's aroma, taste, body, mouthfeel, appearance, balance, my subjective thoughts category, and example of style. So the total score on, we'll just use colloquial, König Ludwig is a 95 out of 100, guys. Absolutely fantastic Weißbier or Hefeweizen if you prefer, but just a great, great representation of what a classic German wheat beer is all about. This is one of the big names out there, guys. They've been brewing for hundreds of years. Absolutely worth your time. And this is one that's actually pretty easy to find nationally. Some grocery stores will carry it in their grocery store. And if not, certainly you could find this in Total Wine all day long or any well-stocked bottle shop or German restaurant that serves German beer. They're probably going to have this because it is a classic. And this is one I would absolutely add to my list if I haven't tried it yet. Folks, that's today's review. As always, I do sincerely appreciate you tuning in today. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. If you want to stay in the loop when our videos go live, just turn on your notifications by hitting that bell icon. Until next time, keep it beer, keep it craft. We'll see you on the next one. Prost.